We all have the same scar on the inside of the elbow, like from a needle. And none of us remembers May 17th, 2010. Not one. But yesterday, Tom found a key in a box with our initials. And that's when everything began to return. The day we chose to forget. He had the scar long before he learned to notice it. As a child, Eli thought it was just a birthmark, a thin trace on the inside of his arm, as if a needle had once pierced the skin there and healed without a trace. He never paid attention to it. Sometimes he'd fidget with it during class or when nervous. Later, he stopped. The scar became part of him, like a mole. He didn't remember where it came from. No pain, no injury, no bandage. It had simply always been there. 15 years later, while going through old boxes in his parents' apartment, he looked at it again. Under the yellow light of the lamp, the scar seemed a little pinker, as if it had only just begun to heal. That surprised him. He had almost forgotten it existed. The box smelled of dust and time, yellowed postcards, broken pencils, photos with torn corners, and at the bottom, a key, ordinary, rust gathering at its base. On the plastic tag, 4 scratched letters, EJCN, Eli, Josh, Claire, Nora. He froze, then reached for his phone. In a chat that had been silent for 3 years, he typed, "Have you ever wondered why we all have the same scar?" Claire was the first to reply. "You mean the one on the elbow? I thought it was just me. What's going on?" Half an hour later, they were on a video call. Grown, different. One in an office, one in a car, one holding a mug. But in each face, the same confusion and the same scar. Identical. Josh was quiet for a long time. Then he held something up to the camera. A faded blue bracelet. "I found this in a drawer. We used to wear these. Right?" Eli didn't know what to say. Inside, something stirred. Not fear, not pain, but a strange recognition, as if memory was knocking at the door, but he didn't know whether to open it. He asked, "Does anyone remember what happened on May 17th, 2010? Silence, and a chill down his spine as he realized no one remembered. Together, 4 faces on a screen, all showing mild anxiety, awkward pauses, as if the conversation touched something too personal, but unclear. Eli, Claire, Josh, and Nora sat in their own rooms, in their own cities, in their own lives. And the only thing uniting them now was absence. "Maybe it was just a normal day," Claire offered carefully, leaning back in her chair. "We just grew up and forgot. The brain deletes what doesn't matter." Josh squinted skeptically, leaning toward the screen. "Then why do we all have scars? And the key?" "No, that's not just statistics, Claire. We remember everything else," Eli murmured, looking away. "The bonfires, the camp, the first week. Only that one day. Gone. Completely." Nora's fingers trembled. She clenched her hands into fists and then released them, as if afraid the memory would rush in too fast. "It's like a shadow. I feel that something happened then, something strong, but I can't grab hold of it," she said without looking up from her screen. They checked calendars. Claire still had her 2010 journal, tiny, neat handwriting, stickers, notes about books and dreams. But for May 17th, blank. Just an empty page. No date, no title, as if it had never existed. Josh had an old phone. He plugged it in, hoping to find photos. The gallery opened, but between May 16th and 18th, nothing. Either we all forgot or we had a synchronized error on our internal hard drives. He grunted. Even Google couldn't explain that. Eli found a school notebook, before and after, pages of notes. But where that day should have been, torn paper, only the bottom half of a word left. Beg. "Are we having a collective amnesiac flashback?" Nora joked weakly, and only Eli smiled faintly. Each of them felt it differently, not fear, but dissonance, as if inside them was a door they had once locked and thrown away the key. Only now the key was back in their hands. "What if—" Eli hesitated, looking at the scar. What if we actually chose to forget? Claire furrowed her brows in silent protest but said nothing. Nora whispered, "We couldn't have just forgotten. Not something like that." Josh gave a crooked smile. "Or we could. Kids are the best archivists, especially when they don't want to remember." No one said no, and that was what scared them most. In her hand, small, oval, with scratched glass and a chain that might once have been silver. Inside, a faded photograph, almost indistinguishable. A playground with trees in the background, a crooked slide, and the shadow of someone's foot in the corner of the frame. She didn't remember where it came from. Found it in a jewelry box among pieces she'd never wear. "It's from that playground," she said calmly, though her clenched jaw betrayed the tension. "Behind the camp. We used to go there." "I think." Josh held an old flashlight. He opened it and showed the inside. Rusted contacts, no batteries. "Doesn't work. But it's weird. When I turn it on in the dark, it's like the air changes. Like time slows down." He shrugged. "Probably nonsense." "It's not nonsense," Nora said sharply. "I feel the same with the whistle. I've had it since childhood, but I never knew where it came from. When I hold it, my heart races. Like, like I was calling someone." She took out a dark blue plastic whistle. On the side, a black burn mark. Nora's eyes lingered on it longer than they should have. Eli silently placed the key on the table, pressed it to his palm. It was warm, as if someone had just held it. "We couldn't have kept these by accident," he said finally. "Not if we forgot." Claire nodded. "It's part of the mechanism. Memory isn't just what's inside. Sometimes it leaves itself in things." "Like traces in a dream," Nora added quietly. "When you wake up knowing something happened, but you can't recall what." Josh took a deep breath. "All right, let's say it's real. But why May 17th? And why all of us? It's too synchronized, too clean. That's not a coincidence." There was no answer. Only the growing sense that their memories weren't just empty. Someone or something had helped them make them that way. To suggest going. "We need to go to the camp, just to see." Maybe there's a rational explanation. No one objected. On the contrary, it was like they'd been waiting for someone to say it out loud. 2 days later, they were riding in an old minivan Josh borrowed. Spring trees flickered past the windows and the road felt longer than they remembered. Or maybe silence just made it stretch. The camp was called Timberline Hollow. Pines, faded signs, a half-collapsed canopy at the entrance. Everything looked smaller than it had in memory, as if time had shrunk it. Cabin number 7, their cabin, stood in the same place. Locked. A taped-on sign read, "Abandoned. Do not enter." But the lock was old. Josh had it open in a minute. Inside, it smelled of wood dust, damp fabric, something old and forgotten. Beds without mattresses, rusty frames, broken furniture. But the strangest thing was on the wall. On a wooden panel, someone had carved 17.05, "Do not open." And beneath it, 4 initials, theirs. And a 5th one, "Road." "Whose are?" Nora whispered. "We didn't have anyone with that. Did we?" They looked at one another. Something tightened in their chests. The name was on the tip of their tongues, but no one could recall it. On the floor lay an old baseball cap, dirty, faded, child-sized. Eli bent down and picked it up. Inside, in black marker, "Route Miles." "Who is that?" They said nothing, but inside each of them, something creaked, shifted. A voice they once knew seemed to whisper their name. Claire suddenly said, "He always slept by the wall, even during the day, like he didn't trust the ceiling." "Remember," Nora added, her voice trembling, "he used to draw monsters, but he said they weren't evil. They were guards. He hung them above his bed." "And that song," Eli spoke as if tasting a memory. "Weird, wordless. He hummed it when he washed his hands. No one knew where it came from. And then Josh fell silent. We forgot him. Just cut him out. What if someone remembers in our place? Someone we pushed out? And all of them, without speaking, turned toward the window. In the trees, someone had just disappeared into shadow, the overgrown path into the woods, toward where the fire pit had once been. The ground squelched beneath their feet, as if it had recently rained, though the forecast had promised dry weather. The air felt damp, almost heavy, and no one spoke. Only footsteps. And birds, loud, anxious, as if something was preventing them from going quiet. The fire pit was still there. Half-rotted planks, a burned edge, a rusted metal hoop embedded in the soil. But the center of the clearing was clean, as if someone had recently swept the leaves away, cleared the ground, or as if it had never been covered in leaves at all. "It happened here," Nora whispered, and no one asked what she meant. Eli took out the key. He didn't know why. He just held it, squeezed it until the metal dug into his palm. A second, and something flashed in his mind. A scream, a burst of light, someone's silhouette framed by fire. And silence. He dropped the key. Claire followed suit, suddenly collapsing as if something had broken inside. She covered her ears and sank to the ground, curled in on herself. Josh stepped toward a tree and froze. At its base, half buried in the dirt, something glinted. He knelt down and picked it up. A knife, small, foldable, with a cracked handle. On the blade near the hinge, finely etched, R+S. "That's not his initial," he said softly. "Who's S?" Nora stared at the knife, unblinking. "He said that day," her voice trembled, "they come when we're silent." "Who does?" No one answered. Now pieces began to return. A boy with eyes too old for 12 and someone whispering, "Don't tell." Someone crying, and something happened. Too terrible for them to handle. They were children, and they chose to forget. Eli wiped his palms on his pants and walked to another tree. There by the roots he saw something half buried. He pulled. It was a pendant, oval, brass on a chain, rusted. On the back, engraved Saint Lang. "Not ours," Claire murmured. "Not from camp," Josh added. "Someone was here before us," Nora said. Then Eli looked up. On the trunk of a pine tree carved carefully with a knife. "Don't be afraid. I remember for us." And beneath it, a handprint, small, as if he was still here. To the cabin, everything felt different. Not that it had changed. The same wooden walls, the same empty beds. But something inside them had shifted, as if, with every minute, what had been forgotten was coming closer, seeping through cracks in their defenses. Claire approached the wall and traced the carving with her finger. 17.05, do not open. "We found him then," she said. "He was hiding under the table in the storage room, shaking. He couldn't speak." Josh placed the knife on the edge of a bunk. "He showed me the pendant, said it belonged to someone who disappeared, and that if we didn't want to disappear too, we had to stay quiet." Nora lowered herself to the floor, wrapping her arms around her knees. He said, "If you don't want anyone to know, let me remember it. Just me." We thought he was just scared, but he knew what he was doing. Eli stood by the wall, silent. Then he looked down at the object in his hand, the key. "We gave him our things that night." He looked around at the others. "I gave him the key. Claire, the locket. Josh, the flashlight. Nora, the whistle. Do you remember?" Claire nodded. "He said he'd hide with them, that it would be like a box where you could put the scary things." "And he did," Nora said softly. "Everything. For us." Eli took out the key, brought it to the wall, and almost instinctively found a notch beneath the panel. He turned it. A metallic click. The panel opened like a door. Behind it, emptiness. Just a wooden recess in the wall. And a child's journal. Blue fabric cover, scrawled in marker. Riv M. He opened to the first page. The handwriting large, uncertain. "If I disappear, don't forget me. or let at least one of you remember. That will be enough. Another page in the corner, barely visible. It's like a box. If you give me what remembers, I'll hide it, so you can go on living. They didn't say anything after that, just sat there. And each of them knew they hadn't chosen to forget. They had chosen to trust. And he had done what they couldn't. He had stayed with it, alone, about it. Didn't open a case, didn't try to find those who had taken Riv. They just took the journal. Each got a page. Eli, the first. Josh, the one where Riv had drawn them, all in a tent under the rain. Nora, a page with a sticker, faded but familiar. And Claire, the last. There were no words on it, only a neatly cut hole, just big enough for a key. One page held almost nothing but a drawing, a stick figure with a round head, 5 others standing beside it, and a dome above them. At the top, in crooked letters, "If I had a shield, I'd give it to you." Sometimes they meet, no reason, no schedule, just because. They drink tea, sit in silence, or remember what can still be remembered. Do you remember how we were scared of the dark in cabin number 7? Or how Josh lost his boot in the river? Or how Riv used to hum that strange tune while we cooked oatmeal? And no one asks, "Who's Riv?" They don't need to. He's with them. Just is. Not as pain, but as something real. They can't get that day back. And maybe they don't want to. But now they know. Forgetting doesn't always mean betrayal. Sometimes it was the only way to survive, especially when you're 12, and you love too deeply to bear what's happening around you. Before leaving, Eli returned to the clearing. The grass had already grown back. He left the key under a stone. Not as goodbye, more like a confirmation. They really had been there. He knelt down, listened. No words, only wind. But somehow he felt as if someone whispered, "Thank you for remembering." He didn't turn around, just walked forward. No grand thoughts, no final conclusions. Only one certainty remained. They got through it. Not because they were strong, but because they were together.